You cannot and should not weaponize BS and just toss it out there. More often than not, Republicans are absolutely against where black folks are. And so I'm going to give them holy hell because I care about my people and where we're going.
Do you think Democrats have done enough to continue to cultivate the black vote?
There was a point where Republicans would condemn racism in their party. Now they openly embrace it. That's just a fact. This is what these white Democratic strategists don't understand. And I'm being very specific because too many of them, they're arrogant, they're dismissive, they don't respect professional black expertise. If you lie, I got a problem. For me, the aim is truth. I don't dance around truth. When he condemned and blew off and made fun of John McCain as a POW, and the Republicans cheered, I said, game over. They said that was acceptable. That was it.
It just seems like we're just in a race to the bottom with no bottom.
Because the problem, Dan, is that in the history of America, white has been the default in America.
Roland Martin, host of Roland Martin Unfiltered. Thank you so much for coming on the People's Cabinet.
Glad to be here. Let's get it.
So you started as both a print journalist and on radio. You went to TV. I don't want to make you feel old, but I grew up watching you on CNN. And now you've launched your own YouTube and independent media empire. Tell me if any of this is wrong, but I believe it's 2 million subscribers, 1 billion views or so. Can you just tell us about how you've seen the evolving media landscape and how you decided to go into this route?
Well, it's interesting. I went to Communications High School, Jack Yates High School and Magna School of Communications in Houston. So going back then, I was doing television, radio, and newspaper. And then when I went to Texas A&M, I still did the same. And then my first job was in newspaper. I was still writing for a black newspaper, Houston Defender. I was at the Austin American Statesman. I go to the Fort Worth Star Telegram. And the Star Telegram, we were one of the first newspapers to have an online outlet. It's called Star Text. And a lot of the people in the newsroom paid no attention to it. And I would go down, I would talk to Gary, I would talk to the whole team. And I was one of the first people who literally, and it was like, we had like 14 floppy disks. So you had to load in 14 floppy disks to load this whole thing into the computer. And so it was fascinating to be able to, wake up at 4:00 in the morning and see your story actually online. And so I always understood how all those converged. And then when I left the Star Telegram, I became news director, morning anchor at KKDA Radio. And then I later was working at the Dallas Weekly. So I was doing those things at one time. I remember I was in the first media convergence. They couldn't even figure out what the name was at Columbia University. I think it was in 2000. And I was the only person, so they had people from CBS and all these different places. I was the only person in the room who literally had already done television, radio, and newspaper. And so I was there. And so I always did it. And when I ran the Chicago Defender, I launched the first Black News audio podcast, 2005, first Black News video podcast, 2006. And so I was already operating, and I was calling myself multimedia convergence long before people were actually doing it. And as a student of the business, I was constantly looking at where we were going. And the whole idea was, where were we going 10, 15, 20, 30 years? And that's really what the focus was and what the emphasis was. And so this was a natural thing for me. And I'll tell you, 2000, you talked about watching me on CNN. So that was 2008. And I remember they were trying to figure out what to do with me because CNN at the time was always about, straight news, whatever. But we saw what the future was: subjective, opinion-driven conversations. And so CNN had CNN Radio. And so what they did was they said, hey, let's have Roland host this weekly radio show. Then they put the radio show on CNN.com. And then several times they were like, hey, let's do a linear hit with Roland while he's on radio, while he's online. And so when the 2008 election was over, Josanne Lopez, who was in program development, went to Susan Grant, who was one of the executives, and said, hey, we need to continue this. And they went to Jim Walton, and then they decided not to further explore it. I thought, because again, their focus was just on linear. That was a huge mistake because you had CNN, you had headline news, which really was targeting conservative white women. I mean, that's literally what they told me. And so they didn't have a place for a person like me because like, where did it fit? That's what they should have done. So it's crazy what CNN is trying to do right now. Had they had the vision then, CNN could have been completely ahead of the ball game by utilizing their website and a digital platform to be able to incubate voices like mine that they did not want to do on CNN because they were trying to be, news down the middle and headline news, and they just didn't. And so, so people like me saw it and just kept building and cultivating. And so when TV One canceled my show in December 2017, that's when I said, no, this is now the time. Because and trust me, Dan, everybody was telling me, man, what are you doing? Don't do this. Try to go back to CNN. Go to MSNBC. And I was like, nope, not interested. Because I saw where we were going. I was studying cord cutting. I was watching that. I was seeing how the business was evolving. And I said, trust me, we're about to go streaming. And then my executive producer, Jay Feldman, Jay said, do an audio podcast. And I was like, no, I wasn't interested. He's like, dude, it's blowing up. I said, no, because I already done it in 2005. But I knew that video was also where we were going. And so people told me I was crazy. I invested $350,000 of my own money. I had one sponsor. And the bottom line is I said, trust me, this is going to work. And now a whole lot of people are like, damn, you were right. And I'm like, I told them. I said, because I understood, I was studying the business. And then I think that's the biggest problem for a lot of people, especially a lot of journalists. They don't study the business of the business. They fall in love with the content, but they aren't studying the business of the business. And so it's been great, and it's been fantastic. And we have 4 of the shows. I'm looking at launching 2 other shows. I just brought on another host who's going to host a daily show. And so it's just been a methodical build.
And where do you think it's going to go? Do you think that any of these linear networks are going to catch on and be able to adapt their model? Or is it because they've already spent all the money, they have the real estate, they've invested so much in their traditional way of doing things that eventually it will just all be people like you? And I mean that in a way of not that they can get the necessary scale, but that they will be independent.
So here's the thing. The problem is they have sunken cost. Okay. And so the problem is they're having to fund this massive infrastructure when you're now operating in a space where you don't need it. So as we're sitting here talking, and COVID really exposed that, okay? COVID exposed how nonsensical their model was. And this is not being slighting. So many people died during COVID. But I experienced this with a lot of black churches, with HBCUs. COVID forced a lot of industries to speed up when they were 10 to 15 years behind. Okay. So you're now communicating right now on this platform called Riverside.fm. I'm sitting in a home studio, green screen, ATM Mini Pro switcher, laptop, lights, microphone, portable teleprompter, all of that. Well, what happened during COVID? COVID showed, why in the hell are we spending money on car service, driving a guest 45, I'm in Northern Virginia, 45, 50 minutes into a studio to do a 7-minute hit and now driving them back? It made no sense. When I would travel a lot, CNN would book a remote studio depending upon where I was. That was $1,000 to $1,500. And then they would have the makeup artists. And listen, I mean, that obviously impacts jobs, things along those lines. But the technology changed the game. And so now, why are we supporting and having to support massive infrastructure costs and staff and building and all? I mean, all those things that go along with it. So here's what's about to happen, and you're already seeing this on the sports side. And the news people, I mean, Fox is doing it, and you're about to see it. So what happened? ESPN had all these amazing people, but they felt constricted and constrained. So what happened? They left. So Dan Patrick, Rich Eisen, we can go on and on and on.
Pablo
Well,
Torre, the whole group.
well, what is ESPN now doing? ESPN is like, damn, the cable ecosystem has imploded. So we got to go to this digital service, $29.99. All right, so you're not watching live sports 24 hours a day. So what are you going to need? Personalities. So now the ESPNs of the world are signing licensing deals with the very people that left. So let me tell you what cable's going to do. And the offshoot, I forgot that weird ass name they chose, MSNBC, they're going to have to do the exact same thing. Yes, yep. Servco, Saramco, I don't know, Saran Wrap, I don't know what the hell the name is. Okay, same thing is going to happen. The only way they're going to survive is they're going to have to go out and cut licensing deals with people who have built a following, who can bring their following to them. That's the only way it's going to work. So they let talent walk out of the door, not realizing that that like doesn't make any sense. And so they're going to start. I mean, trust me, it's going to happen. So and you look at what Fox is doing. They've gotten far more aggressive than anybody else when it comes to understanding streaming, because all of these people thought there was like this huge pot of people who had never watched cable, who all of a sudden watching streaming. Was kind of like, no, idiots. It's like all the same people. But the technology has changed. And here's what's crazy. So for the first five and a half years of my show, because the show is 7 years old, September 4th. The network is 4 years old on September 4th. So everything was this. What's happening now with YouTube? If I pull up my YouTube dashboard, 60% of the people watching are watching on televisions. See, so the reverse has happened. So for the longest, it was this pads was and laptop. They were driving everything. Then it was like, oh, forget the laptop, forget the desktop. It's all about this. Now, the same people are falling in love with television. Why? Because you now have the televisions that are now wired. You buy the TV. You don't need to even buy the Amazon Fire Stick, the Roku, the Apple TV, because the apps are already on the television. And so they're now watching right there on television. And so now that even changes how you do programming. And so I think these news networks are going to go out and start cutting licensing deals with people who have huge followings. And because otherwise, they're not going to be able to survive. YouTube is the largest video platform in the world. They're bigger than Netflix, okay? YouTube, unlike the movie studios, they don't have to spend billions on content because the creators are already spending. YouTube is essentially an ad network. That's what they are. They've got the eyeballs, but they also have the relationships with the advertisers. And so the 55-45 split is critical. And so the reality is, you don't need the networks. And so that's an ego thing. That's like, oh, I'm with, because when I got Journalist of the Year from NABJ in 2013, this is what I said.
And that's the National Association of Black Journalists.
Yeah, this is what I said. I said, when we launched my show, I could not get an associate producer at CNN, MSNBC, Fox, ABC, NBC, CBS to even apply to be the executive producer of my show. And I said, this is why. Because too many of you are enamored with the largeness of the letters on your business card. I said, you have big letters, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, and you got small opportunities. I said, but for me, I said, when I'm sitting at the White House across from the president or the vice president, I was there representing TV One. There were major anchors at all those networks who were not sitting at the table because they were not the main anchor. I said, so I prefer a big opportunity at a smaller place than a small opportunity at a big place.
And people came up to me about, how are you thinking about the other side of the ledger, which is how people are consuming news as a result of this? I remember sitting at a dinner not too long ago, and someone at the table, we were just talking about independent media, said, I listen only to Roland Martin. I get all of my news from Roland Martin every day. And it seems like there is a new way of consuming where people
Yeah.
rely on your journalism to consume. And unfortunately, in my opinion, people also rely on far right media for
Yep.
their own journalism. How do you think about that? And how do we cross those silos?
So the first thing is what is your aim? For me, the aim is truth. I don't dance around truth. So the problem that I have is when people are listening to a lot of these places and they're not based in truth. They're based in fiction. They're based in BS. Chris Metzler, God rest his soul, was a black conservative, and there was other black Republicans who would go, Chris, I don't understand why you keep going on Roland's show. And Chris said, and they're like, well, because when I go on, all he does is yell and scream. Chris said, no, because your ass lie. He said, I'm not stupid enough to go and lie because Roland gonna kick my behind and bust me in a lie. He said, if y'all don't lie, you're not gonna have a problem. And he's right. If you lie, I got a problem. So now so that really is, so the problem does become when a person is so wedded to only one voice. And the question is, what is that voice giving them? When I went on the Breakfast Club, what I said to Charlemagne and DJ Envy, I said, you have to have a massive amount of respect and care for this thing right here. I said, because what comes into your brain and out of your mouth into this thing and then goes out to the world, once that thing goes out, you cannot control how it is received. I said, so you cannot and should not weaponize BS and just toss it out there because you don't know how it's going to be received. So I've always maintained that when you come on my show and you lie, I have to stop you immediately because I don't want Dan sitting there listening, watching, going, well, Roland didn't interrupt him. He didn't say anything. And so clearly what that person said, that has to be true. So my whole deal is, no, you're not going to lie. We're going to operate in truth. We're going to operate with facts. Obviously, I have a point of view. Obviously, I center African Americans, and the concerns of African Americans is what I focus on. And I could have easily done something that's mainstream, broad. But the problem that I saw was that they're literally, when my show got canceled, there was no daily news show in America that centered African Americans on linear or digital. And I said, I can't have that. But it's about truth. And unfortunately, there are a lot of shows out here that aren't based upon that. I don't call myself a conservative. I don't call myself a progressive. I don't call myself liberal, a Democrat, or Republican. I say I'm black. Now people say, "Whoa, you tout Democrats over Republicans," because I look at the interest that African Americans have, and more often than not, a lot more often, Republicans are absolutely against where black folks are. And so I'm going to give them holy hell because I care about my people and where we're going.
To that point of respect and where we're going, it feels like, and I'm eager for your thoughts on this. Donald Trump, especially with people of color, and in particular black people, in my opinion, has exhibited not just subtle but blatant racism in a lot of his comments. But there's a lot of stuff that I think because Trump just keeps saying ridiculous things, he gets a free pass from mainstream media. Like I did a segment on his CNBC hit where he said something like, we've tried to have people from the quote inner city do work and they just won't do the work, right? And it's obviously a racial trope, but he didn't get it. He didn't get called on it. I mean, there was no one else calling on it. And he just does stuff like that every day. I'm curious on your perspective on that kind of filter that's happening today. And then also, do you think Democrats have done enough to continue to cultivate the black vote?
So I'm gonna give you an example. This happened during the 2016 race. And I will never forget this. The New York Times does a story on Donald Trump's treatment of women. And it was a really wretched story. So the next day on Morning Joe, Joe Scarborough, Mark Halperin, and others are talking about it. And literally, Scarborough goes, "This it? Oh, this the best. Oh, this is Trump being Trump." And I'm watching this going, what the hell? It was this very dismissive, and that's, first of all, that's no shock that I haven't been back on Morning Joe since 2015. So I haven't even, they just stopped even emailing, returning emails and phone calls. So it's been 10 years. But that's a perfect example. So what they did was, here you had this story that was a damning story, and what they immediately went to, oh, that's Trump being Trump. So what happened was, mainstream media normalized everything. So what then happened, I'm telling you, if anybody thinks I'm lying, you can find the clip of Joe Scarborough, Mark Halperin discussing that New York Times story, and the commentary to me was abysmal. And so that set up this whole thing of, oh, so Trump could do and say outlandish things. They would go, oh, that's Trump being Trump. So what then happened was, he's like, oh, cool. What else can I get away with? When he condemned and blew off and made fun of John McCain as a POW, and the Republicans cheered, I said, game over. Because Republicans were always, oh, you don't criticize the military. Oh my God, you don't criticize not America's military. When they said that was acceptable, that was it. So what he has done is, he says so many outlandish things so often. Not only have they become desensitized, they essentially laugh. And so it then causes the public to then go, well, I guess it's no big deal. And so there's that video they did of this fake audio of Trump saying all kind of outlandish, horrendous, racist things. And it was a room of Trump supporters. I saw it the other day, and they're like, well, man, that's just locker room talk. Oh, I mean, that was long. They came up with so many excuses. And this is the problem. And so then you take that, but then all of a sudden, a Democrat will do something. And then you have this sanctimonious, holier than thou. Are you going to condemn that? Are you going to? And all this sort of stuff like that. And I'm watching this with Mamdani right now. It's like every single Democrat, oh my God, oh my God, he's a socialist. And look at what he's saying. And okay, so let's see. Okay, so he won the Democratic primary. People actually voted, just like the sister who won the Democratic primary in Buffalo, but then Byron Brown ran as a write-in and beat her in the general. And I'm going, okay, but you've literally got avowed white supremacists on the Republican side. And they don't have any problem with those folks in the party. I mean, we could just go down the line of the stuff, but this is how mainstream media operates. And I'll tell you, when I was at CNN for 6 years, I used to sit there and I would, and this is what drives me crazy. You would go, y'all missed that? Y'all didn't hear that part right there? Did y'all not? Oh, was I the only one who caught that? And so what Trump now has done is, he has effectively said whatever he thinks is fake, his followers go, well, yep, it's fake. And again, media is not, they're not vigilant. The last week, oh my God, you cannot tell me if Joe Biden is showing up in public with burn marks on his hand, huge ankles, all right, and not seen in public for 6 days, they'll be like, okay, that's part of the deal. So they played this go along to get along game, and now the genie's out of the bottle. Now you can't challenge anything because you excused so much for so long. And that's also why people are like, you know what? I can't watch y'all. I can't watch y'all. I can't listen to y'all. I can't listen to this hypocritical nonsense, and that's what they do. There's a video right now. Senator Schmidt of Missouri gives this blatantly racist speech to the Edmund Burke Foundation National Conservative Bill, literally saying that that this country, our ancestors created this only for us and their descendants. He literally gives, I mean, it's crazy. It is an absolute racist speech. He goes, they weren't fighting for a proposition. They were fighting, this was ours and only ours. What this white Republican from Missouri is saying is, this is our country. And you know what? That's the basis of my book, White Fear. I literally wrote this. I said, guys, this is what their thinking is. And all of this stuff you're seeing right now is all about them saying the rest of y'all don't belong. There's a great clip from The Good Shepherd. Or the Under Shepherd, I forgot. It's with Joe Pesci and Matt Damon. Dan, I play this all the time. In 48 seconds, they literally explain the United States of America. And Joe Pesci goes, he said, tell me something. They're trying to get Pesci, a mobster, to kill Castro. Pesci goes, let me ask you something. The Irish got the homeland. The Italians got our family. The Jews got their traditions. He uses the N-word to describe black people. He said, they got their music. He says, what do you people have? And the Matt Damon character, this WASP, early CIA, he says, we have the United States of America. The rest of you are just visiting.
Do you think we will ever... Go ahead.
Go ahead. That scene right there explains the present day thinking and why we're facing the problems that we have right now.
Do you think we will ever return to some kind of, I mean, I'd be curious your thoughts if we ever had an equilibrium that you were okay with. But, you know, the example that I know you've also covered on your network is Jillian Michaels on Newsnight with Abby. You know, I've been on her show a bunch of times, Abby's show. And, you know, as you know, she tried to justify slavery by claiming only a certain percentage of white people had slaves. Abby did I think, very responsible piece the next day or so covering it. And then there's video. This isn't even mainstream media. This is Megyn Kelly literally laughing while playing the clip of Abby covering this incredibly serious topic. I mean, how do we get to a point where there is understanding and an acceptability of some kind of baseline here? I mean, it just seems like we're just in a race to the bottom with no bottom.
It is a race to the bottom with no bottom. So here's what Trump has unleashed. And actually, this is why I chose this photo. So, photo of this book. Why did I choose that photo? That's a white male with his arms outstretched. U.S. Capitol. And this symbolized for me, all of this is ours. So here's what we have to understand. And that Senator Eric Schmidt quote comment is so important. And what I lay out in this book, and it's very simple. When we talk in America about we talk about identity politics. That's only through the prism of Black identity politics, Latino identity politics, gay identity politics. But there's no belief that there's a white identity. And it is. Because the problem, Dan, is that in the history of America, and the Schmidt speech speaks to this, white has been the default in America. So when we say mainstream media, what does that actually mean? White people. All right, sure, if some Asians and Latinos and Black people watch, we're targeting white people. I worked in radio. I was at KRLD in Dallas. They would literally say, hey, we're focusing on Plano and North Dallas. What were they saying? It's where the white people live. They didn't give a damn about what was happening in South Dallas. It's where Black people lived. So they would say these things. When Katz Media issued a no urban dictate, what did that mean? Yeah, we're not going to buy ads on urban radio. First of all, what is urban radio? Black. Just another way of saying black by saying urban. So white has always been the default. I'll give you an example. Donald Trump, Joe Biden, meets with a group of Black pastors. Trump meets with a group of white pastors. What do they say? Donald Trump meets with the evangelical community. So in this country, we won't even identify white. But we'll identify Black, Latino, Asian American, Native American. We'll do that. So that's also the game that we play. So what you have is the reason that Megyn Kelly will laugh is the same Megyn Kelly who says Santa Claus is white. Because that's the default in this country. Whiteness is the default. Here you go. Same Megyn Kelly ripping apart Vogue. Well, you can't say anywhere in the world that Michelle Obama is a beautiful person, whatever her quote was. But she's trumpeting Melania. I've seen Melania up close. She don't appeal to me. Sorry. So what Trump has done, Trump has he has unleashed, he's removed the shackles. It used to be a point where folk were not comfortable, frankly, saying racist stuff. Trump is like, don't worry about it. We good. Y'all can say whatever you want. And people are like, oh my God, yes. And that's why, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. So they have unshackled. So what was suppressed, what was held back, what was condemned, they're now like, go right ahead, you're good. So we ain't going back to that point. That period where people, I mean, look, there was a period where the Voting Rights Act wasn't a controversial vote. It was damn near unanimous. There was a point where Republicans would condemn racism in their party. Now they openly embrace it. That's just a fact. The Proud Boys, I saw an article today, the Proud Boys said, we don't even have to march anymore because we're now on the inside.
What do you also make, though, of new candidates in the party also needing to earn trust? I mean, you brought up Zohar Mamdani.
Yes.
You look at the demographic breakdowns of who voted for him, and Black people over 50, overwhelmingly supported Cuomo. How do you think through that? And how does someone like Zohar Mamdani, or even candidly like someone like Pete Buttigieg, continue to earn trust in the Black community?
Okay, so first of all, whenever we talk about that, we have to break down, okay, like I always look at, give me the context of that. So Mamdani runs. How many people were running against Mamdani? It was like, 12, 14, 15 people? About 5 Black people. So if I'm running, I'm studying numbers, and I'm saying, I need to win. I need to be in the top 2, at least top 2. So if I'm running and I got 5 Black people who are running, it's a good bet I'm not going to win a sizable percentage. So I have to put together a winning coalition because I got to win the primary. Now, once the general comes, now I can pivot. Now I can go broader because I'm trying to win the general election. So I understand it. That's just basic politics. I don't care if a man is running and he's running and there are 3 women he's running against. Okay, you start looking at that. You say, okay, what's the percentage of the women vote that I might get? Is it going to be, it's not going to be 50%. So it's going to be 15, 20%. Okay, I need to now over-index in other groups. So you study how do you win. So what Mamdani has to do is now, after the primary, you now shift to say, I now have to have a much broader campaign. Same thing with Representative Cheryl in New Jersey. I've been getting calls on it. She has to do a hell of a lot more to reach Black people. And even though she picked this guy to be her running mate, a lot of Black people in New Jersey are like, we don't even know who this dude is. So what you have to do is, and this is where the Black voter has changed. This is what these white Democratic strategists don't understand. And I'm being very specific because too many of them, they're arrogant, they're dismissive, they don't respect professional Black expertise. You have to look at numbers. I'm 56 years old. I'm 57 in November. My parents are 78. My dad is 78. Mom is 78 in November. So when you look at African Americans, 65 plus, largely identify as Democrats. You go to the next grouping, okay, which is Gen X, still somewhat identify as Democrats. Now, I've been watching this since, because I was in college and I saw this through the conversations. I saw, Dan, the transition, the shift happening, where you had African Americans who were going to college, who were earning more than their parents, who were now dealing with stuff their parents were not dealing with. We all of a sudden were in different tax brackets. We were having conversations that our parents never had: investments, stocks, bonds, estate tax. I mean, all those different things all of a sudden comes up. So now your view begins to change. Now you're listening to different things. Once you go below Gen X, and then you go millennial, Gen Z, then of course you go on to Alpha. Now what has happened is you now have individuals who are the further you get away from the civil rights movement, they are less inclined to self-identify. Now, that's self-identify. The second thing is, how do they likely vote? Do they likely vote Democrat? That is still the case for African Americans. The problem for these white Democratic strategists is they don't understand the shift. So therefore, they're still trying to run the baby boomer campaign of, listen, they're there. We'll talk to them a month or two out. We don't have to expend significant resources. Nah, that game has changed. You're going to have to spend 3 to 4 to 5 more time and money to cultivate that black voter, because a lot of these black voters are saying, if I'm not feeling either one of y'all, I'm going to sit out. So the problem is, sure, you still might get 85, 87, 89% of the black vote, but the issue is, what's the turnout? So how many black folks didn't vote in Georgia in November? According to one calculus, almost 1 million. Some 600,000 blacks in North Carolina did not vote. So when you start looking at that, that's why I have really been emphasizing on my show that I need African Americans to be voting at a 70% of our capacity. Because when we do that, elections change. You go Louisiana. You had a black a brother running for governor of Louisiana against MAGA Jeff Landry. Okay, the whole goal was to get to a runoff. Landry got more than 51%. The black turnout was awful. From a Democratic Party standpoint, they did nothing aggressive to mobilize and organize. And so the fundamental problem for Democrats right now is white Democratic strategists are so arrogant that they won't listen to black posters. They won't listen to Latino posters. They won't listen to Chuck Roken. I just had this conversation on my show. They won't listen to people who know these communities, and then they won't make the investment. So they are still sitting here, in a little piecemeal. I mean, the Harris campaign, the black spend was about $22 million. $22 million out of $1 billion? The PAC, whatever the hell name, I forgot the name of it, they were even more awful. They were even more awful. And so they were so arrogant, they wouldn't even return emails or phone calls. And so I'm like, okay, guess what? You're going to keep losing. And then what Republicans are doing, they're nibbling at the edges. So Republicans are not trying to grab 30, 40% of the black vote. Their whole deal is, if we can shift from 12 to 15, and they understanding what the messaging is. Do you understand that Republicans were running transgender commercials on black radio stations in January, February, and March of 2024? And then it wasn't until football season you start seeing these ads during the football games. That was happening. And then, in the Harris campaign, they literally said, oh, well, we're not seeing any movement with these spots. And we're like, are y'all nuts? Because they weren't understanding African Americans are traditionally conservative. That whether people want to accept it or not, that was an issue that was moving black men, moving some black women, and all you need to move is 2 to 4%. And that's what they were not getting. And so my advice to every Democratic candidate, tell your white Democratic strategists to shut the hell up, put the money and the time behind it. And you can't just say, I'm going to go to a black church on a few weekends. No, they have to literally spend time listening, talking. And I say right now, this is September, if you're a Democratic candidate, you should be in what I call an inform, enlighten, and educate stage right now. You do that for the next 6 months, leading up to primaries. And then all of a sudden, because I have to inform, educate, enlighten to get you to understand the issues, then I got to get you to register. Then I got to get you to go from registering to actually voting. I can't just say, hey, please vote. No. Voting is the end of the process. Then register, but I got to inform, enlighten, and educate. And too many of these folks are not doing it because they're listening, and be very frank, to white Democratic strategists, media strategists, campaign leaders who ignore Black expertise, and they're going to keep getting their asses kicked if they don't listen to Black folks, Latinos, and others who understand their community. You can't be bringing in somebody, Dan, as your communications director from who lives in somewhere else into a state, and you don't know anybody there, you don't know the nuances, you don't know the players, and then you figure you're going to have an effective communication strategy. That's just dumb.
To the point of engagement, there's a lot of people, I think, who are still very disengaged. I mean, as to your point, didn't even show up in November, but are still feeling pretty hopeless. They see what Trump is doing. They see what the media is allowing Trump to do, and they're distressed. So my final question to you is, what is your advice to people listening right now who know those people in their communities, who know those people who are just saying, I'm done with politics, about how to get them engaged again?
First, somebody has to be there to connect the dots for them. I'm a huge believer in connecting the dots. And what I mean by that is people go, I'm done with politics. And I would go, do you know how much of your life is impacted by politics? They go, oh, it's really not. I'm like, no, yes, it is. And I would then tell them, I would say, you do know that when you're born, your birth certificate is a government document. And when your child goes to school, the immunization record is a government document. And when they graduate from high school, public school, that's a government document, the diploma itself. And then I go, and when you get married, that's a government document. When you get divorced, that's a government document. And then when you die, your death certificate is a government document. And I then say, so let's talk about where you live, your roads, government. That street light, government. That sewer system, government. I said, your house, code violations, government. The water you drink, government. You don't want your kids playing on playground equipment that doesn't have lead paint, government. Food that you eat, government. I walk them through. So I go, so explain to me how every facet of your life is impacted by government, but you want to check out and leave it up to somebody else to decide your future. And then they look at me, Dan, they go, I didn't know that. So what does that mean? The first mistake that we make, I won't say smart versus dumb. I won't say that. I will say informed versus ill-informed. The first mistake that informed people make is they assume everybody knows this stuff. They don't. You and I live and breathe this stuff. It's just natural. What we read, but a lot of people have no idea. And so it takes somebody to walk them through, hey, this is what's going on. This is how your life is impacted. City council, county government, school board, judges, DA, state rep, state senate, governor, house member, senate member, president, executive branch. They go, damn, I didn't realize that. Do you know how long it took progressives to realize they need to stop going to Washington, D.C. to deal with mass incarceration and realize that the number one most important person that impacts mass incarceration is the damn district attorney? Then all of a sudden people are like, damn, what are we doing? So they started actually investing in DA races. Those were dominated by right-wing, hardcore conservatives who were about tough on crime. So this is why I'm saying inform, educate, and light. Maya Angelou, a month before she died, she had her portrait unveiled at the National Portrait Gallery, and they had a birthday party for her at the Museum of African Art. So I got a chance to talk to her and interview her. And I made a comment to her, Dan. I said, my brother, 3 sisters, all involved in education, teachers aid. I'm the only one who didn't. She says, oh no, Roland. She said, you are a teacher. I watch you. You teach. And then it was the first time that I really thought about what I do as teaching. And so what then began to happen, I then said, you know what? We're not going to do the traditional cable stuff, and we never really did, of, 6, 7, 8 minutes. No, there are times when I'll take 20, 30, 40, 50, an hour, 2 hours. In essence, we're teaching because people just don't know. And that's what we have to do. In order for us to reach those people, damn, we got to teach them. We got to connect the dots. We got to show them that checking out of a process means they're letting other people decide their fate. They're letting other people decide whether their community gets roads or gets any construction or gets new housing or gets health care or gets a new school from the bond election. The reason I know this, my parents were co-founders of a civic club. So I saw at the age of 8, 9, and 10, 11, and 12 what it meant for regular, ordinary people to impact their community. I'm writing a book on this very idea. We can actually take the country back, but we cannot do it if we don't. The 90 million people who sat out, they're potential voters. But we have to talk to them, reach them, walk them through, educate them, and show them how their involvement can actually change their lives for the better. If we don't understand that, Reverend William Barber and Poor People's Campaign, Repairs of the Breach, have really been focused on this. And this means talking to, and I've challenged Senator Bernie Sanders on this, Senator Elizabeth Warren, others, and I've said this to Congressman Ro Khanna. I said, man, listen, y'all got to have the courage to go talk to the whitest, reddest, brokest, most illiterate parts of America and say, why are y'all continuing to vote against your own interests? You're voting against your economic interests, your educational interests, your health interests. I told Obama, man, stop going to the suburbs of Ohio and Virginia and Maryland touting the Affordable Care Act. I said, man, go to the sickest, whitest, most conservative, reddest state and say, I passed this law for y'all. See, that's where we keep trying to avoid people. No. We got to look folk in the eye and say, and this is the last point. When people come to me, they say, man, I don't know what to do. I'm sorry. I go, what do you care about? They're like, what do you mean? I said, what do you care about? Give me your top 3. Brother tells me, education. I said, you got any kids? He goes, yeah. What grade? I said, your kids, what are they? They're in grade school, elementary school. I said, belong to the PTA? He says, no. I says, well, how in the hell can you tell me you care about education, but you can't belong to the PTA? He went, damn, I never thought about it. I said, so you want somebody else to fight for your kids' education, but not you. And so that's how the conversation started. That's what we have to do. Ella Baker, one of our greatest organizers, she told the SNCC students, take your college clothes off and put your overalls on. And when you go talk to those black sharecroppers, they might have a 2nd and 3rd grade education, but they're smart. Listen to them and ask them what they want and say, I'm here to work with you to make that happen. Don't go and tell them this is what you need. That is the mistake that Democrats make. That's the mistake that they are seeding. They're not saying to the people, what do you want? And I'm going to work to make that happen, but I need you to help me make that happen as well.
Roland Martin, thank you so much for coming on the People's Cabinet. Please check him out on YouTube, on social media, anywhere else that people should look for you for.
Again, our app is Black Star Network. Go to our YouTube channel, subscribe there, watch us there. And I get stopped in the airport all the time. Y'all can cop one of these shirts. We made the shirt, Don't Blame Me, I Voted for the Black Woman. So go to shopblackstarnetwork.com. You want to get this. Plus, we got some other great ones as well, including got FAFO 2025 with Project crossed out. So we got some great ones folks can get.
Roland, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the People's Cabinet. If you did, please like, subscribe, ring that bell, and put in the comments below who else you'd like to see sworn in. And stay tuned for new episodes every Tuesday. Let's go.